Welcome to the Healing Process, episode 105, called No More Tears. Today's guests are all professional in the area of therapy. The reason we brought them here today is so many things that we're dealing in the black community from a mental health standpoint. And I just want to bring some young professionals in, some that's growing up at the same age as those who are outside protesting, and just get their thoughts on what our hurts and pains are in this community. Introduce each and every one of them before we get started. First, right here is, go right ahead, Jerron.
Jerron Jones.
Tell us about yourself.
So Jerron Jones, I'm a Louisville native, born and raised, been here 30 plus years, currently a PhD student at Bellarmine. I work for a local nonprofit as a therapist. A lot of my work is centered around identifying equity for young black men. So I'm doing a lot of research based upon that. And for me, I'm just a concerned citizen. I want better for my community. Again, a lot of my resources and connections are within the city of Louisville. So I think, as a resident, it's only right for me to give back in any kind of capacity. So that's me in a nutshell, and I'm excited to be here.
Okay, the queen of the panel, go right ahead.
Queen. My name is Carly Bryan. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I currently am the director of community-based services. So I mainly work with children and families. That's pretty much me.
Okay, great. Go right ahead.
All right, my name is Perry Blair. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor, founder of Crimson Dove Counseling Services, Crimson Dove ABI. Assistant professor of psychology at IU Southeast. I'm excited to be here. I started out working with youth for the most part, and I've shifted a lot to working with adults and just a variety of different individuals, and excited to be here.
Well, great. The first question I'm going to open up with is that, what's the difference between a psychologist and a therapist? I think everybody asked that question. Go right with you, Perry.
I think fundamentally the difference would be that the psychologist does more assessment work, and their focus, at least as far as I go, I'm a counselor, and so the psychologist looks at more of a medical model of how they view disorders and how they treat, unless they're a clinical psychologist, but then I look more of a wellness model, a wellness approach, where I'm kind of looking at spiritual, looking at what's going on in the house, what's going on around them, the stressors they're in their life, looking at their history, kind of looking at more of a broad stroke to deal with whatever's going on in their life.
Okay, I'm going to follow up, and I normally go around in a circle, but I got to follow up on something you said. You said the spiritual. Mm-hmm. What about the person that's spiritualist, that has no connection? What do you do in that case?
It's part of who they are. And so although I'm looking to identify all the different categories of what makes them who they are, the lack of spirituality doesn't make an impact. That's just a part of who they are, and I work to address that.
Well, great.
The same way.
Now, we know that COVID-19 has challenged every community, but it's challenged the black community, I think, stronger than any community that I know of, that at least that I'm part of. And my question to the COVID-19, I think everybody's out of their comfort zone now. Whether you're black, white, green, you're out of your comfort zone. This COVID-19 has turned everybody to an uncomfortable situation, whether it's racial, being an uncomfortable situation, whether it's economics, whether it's your kids at home. But everybody's uncomfortable. And I think when everybody's uncomfortable, we do uncomfortable things, or we feel like we lost control. And I think everybody wants control in their life. So how, as a therapist, are you dealing with the control or the issues that people have, if that is something that we're dealing with? Go ahead, Carl.
With my caseload, my clients, I think one of the main stressors that families are experiencing is they can't go and do the things that for self-care or for entertainment. Kids can't play sports, they can't go to parks. I know that some of the restrictions have been lifted more recently, but it's just a complete change. Mothers are not getting breaks. They're at home with the kids all day. A lot of them have lost their jobs. And children are scared more than anything else. A lot of my sessions are focused on them just being afraid that someone is going to die in their family.
Wow, I never thought about kids dealing with death. Now I understand kids dealing with death in neighborhoods that you see death, but I never thought about COVID being something that expands neighborhoods and that kids will worry about death. And what kind of questions would they say, or how will that plan out?
Yeah, a lot of times they just ask, when is it going to end? You know, I feel like the children that I've been working with that's just been the main question. Like, when is this going to end? When are we going to go back to normal? Am I going to die if I get COVID-19? Is my mom going to die? Those are pretty much the main questions focused around, like, what can they do to help? When can we go outside? We feel trapped. I think there's just so much stress that they're under with the unknown, and like they are going to their parents for answers, and their parents don't have answers either. So my main focus is finding healthy ways to cope.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So my experience is kind of twofold. So as you know, March 13th was typically, for most, the last day of school from a public school standpoint, and most private schools too. And so, you know, kids went from going to school every single day to pretty much overnight now being homeschooled. And then also, too, you had parents going from going to work every single day now being at homeschool teachers. And so, you know, for the children, it's impacted them from a psychological, social, and emotional standpoint. You know, kids they don't have that connection with their friends in person. And then now parents have to figure out how to implement this technology piece, so this NTI piece, right? And so, you know, I think what it did is it essentially, one, created a really unique bond between families and their children again, because it went back to, now let's have these discussions that we would have never had maybe at this time of life. And so going back to piggyback off what Carly said, I think the uncertainty and the unknown for children as to when does school start back up again? When do I see my friends again? Because that brings a sense of belonging for children. You know, once you're in the school building and you're interacting and you're engaging, and then if you have a question, you're able to get an explanation. I think a lot of times, from what I've seen, the NTI is more of a implementation piece to just have some kind of curriculum as opposed to really teaching it. There may be, you know, short videos on how to do a particular topic, but there's no step-by-step instruction. Which, you know, for example, I had a client's mom text me yesterday, and it hurt my heart. She texted me. She said, "Hey, Jerron, I'm pulling my son out of XYZ school because we cannot do this NTI thing. One, because he was being resourced, which means he's getting pulled out of class. He's in small group sessions. On NTI, you can't do that. And so this young man is not on grade level on any core subjects, math, reading, writing. So if you know he was behind when he was going in school building, he's definitely going to be behind, you know, with NTI. And so she chose to pull him out and homeschool. And I guess my concern was, I think homeschool was more even challenging, right? Because you have to, one, spend a vast amount of money on curriculum. And then two, you have to be the teacher, you know what I mean, and report your outcome measures and so forth. So I think academically, I think it's just widening the gap, right? We've always had this academic achievement gap between black and white counterparts. Now it's even got worse. So I'll be interested to see what happens after September 28th as public schools make their decision moving forward.
And you mentioned, all three of you mentioned control. I think I mentioned control starting off my question. As a parent, I'm a parent, even though my kids are not young anymore. I remember the greatest thing about being a parent is that you could control the atmosphere. Whatever you want to tell your child, whether Santa Claus, whatever you want to tell them, it was the truth at the time you told them, right?
Yeah.
So my stress, or not stress, but just watching young people try to navigate through that, there is no control. Parents don't have control of this situation. They're just, I would think we're just we're handicapped in a sense that when I watch my grandchildren, and I see them do this in-home school, whatever, on the computer type of thing, and I just see the challenges of them being still, right? Just being still, trying to learn. And I just realized even at my age how difficult it is for me to look at a computer all day and challenge. So I imagine the challenges is greater on the kid, but even greater on the parent that can't control the situation. Because as parents, we always want to control. So my question to any of you is that, what do you say to the parent that has lost control? What do you say to them?
You know, I've had several parents in my practice that have talked to me about that situation, about the loss of control, not knowing what to do with NTI. And, you know, I always like to try to basically explain to them that, you know, all things are just temporary inconvenience. And all those stress levels are really high for them. And I can understand that, right? You know, we have parents that used to be able to work full time, and some of them have had to stay home to care for their children just to get through NTI. And so, you know, so I just try to make note of the temporary nature of it. Like I say, trouble don't last always. We'll get through it together, and I provide that encouragement and just some strategies to kind of navigate that.
Cool.
Yeah, so for me, I focus on, as a parent, what do you do well, as opposed to what you are not doing enough of. I think for me, with that component, parents feel a sense of empowerment. And so, for example, what do you do well every day with your son or daughter as it relates to NTI? Do you get up and make sure they log on at a particular time? Are you communicating with the teachers on assignments turned in and assignments that are missing? And how well do you encourage your kiddo throughout the day? I know for me as a parent, I've got an 11-year-old son. He's in 6th grade. And this year, I've given him much autonomy, just to pretty much just be who he is with this whole computer thing. Because, back in March, if I ever said that word homework in the house, we were like oil and water. It just didn't flow well because I was trying to adjust to implement this instructional piece. He was adapting. I was doing my own schoolwork and, day-to-day work. And so, it went from, seeing him 4 p.m. after to now being home with him all day. And it was new for both of us. And so, the control piece at one point did go out the window. But, for me, it's just more so, what are you doing well? And let's capitalize on that so we both can be in a good mood. I think that for me, that helps me. It helps parents that I work with. And it really illuminates, some of their strengths as opposed to focusing on their weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Well, traditionally, nothing you guys don't know is that as a black community, we don't look for mental health care as a whole. We want to answer our own questions. We want to go to Big Mama to answer the question, but never a doctor or a counselor to answer the question. In the atmosphere we're in today, as a black community, are we learning something different, how to navigate this thing too, as a whole? Going to health professionals, is that new for our culture to do?
I would say so. I think that there is a mental health stigma within the black community. And I think that lately there's been so much like holistic and mental health, and people being encouraged to do so. The way that I have been interacting with my families and my parents that I've been working with is to also focus on their strengths and allowing them to understand that what they're feeling and experiencing is normal, and telling them to take it easy on themselves and cut themselves some slack. Because I think that everyone is in panic mode and trying to figure out how to navigate this. And I think that if we can just accept that we are all in kind of like an unknown space, and it's okay to navigate it how we figure it out, because no one could have guessed that we'd be going through a pandemic.
Well, let me ask you this again to all three of you, especially in the black community. We're dealing with the COVID. That's one issue. We're dealing with the injustices that's going on in our household when we talk about education, redlining. All those issues are in our homes, right? And now that they're in our homes, the parents are dealing with those issues along with the child's issue. So I would think at this time and date, there's a lot of navigation going on in black homes, right? So my question would be, if I'm, let's say for instance, you going out every night and you protesting, right? And you protesting, you coming home at 10 o'clock at night, maybe the wife or girlfriend's got the kids and she's doing the IT piece, but you're not working, but you're protesting. And you coming home, you drained, you're emotionally drained, you're physically drained, and you're dealing with all those issues that we're dealing with in the street on a one-on-one basis. So you can't come home at a zero level because your level's here, right? So what happens to a household when those men or women are involved in the struggle physically and they come home and try to depress in a situation that's already pressure? What happens in that situation?
Well, I would say that I think what we've noticed as far as the society in general, there's been increases in aggressive acts in the home, domestic violence. The divorce rate is starting to skyrocket as a result of COVID-19. And you know, it's really from just that lack of, as she said already, that stigma in the African American community related to mental health. I'm excited to say that that stigma is starting to lift. You see a lot of celebrities that are promoting mental health. People are just really into it now. I've noticed a tremendous increase in African Americans seeking services from my agency. Mm-hmm. And what I do is I normalize what's going on with them, their feelings. You know, it's powerful when I, as an African American man, can sit there with my client and identify, yes, I am going through the same feelings and the same struggles you are, and validate that. And just that simple validation is powerful. Just let them know you're not alone. And we're going to get through this, and we're going to do it together. And the same things I'm telling you to do are the things that I have to do to get through it every day.
I like that.
So I read a study a few days ago that talked about people that identify as Black or African American and the percentage of who has been diagnosed with a mental illness. And so I think Blacks and African Americans, we're about 13.4% of the population, right? As of 2018, of that percentage, about 17 or 18% reported as having some kind of form of diagnosis of mental illness, which equates to about 7 million people, which that 7 million is larger than the population of Philadelphia, Chicago, and Houston combined. It's a huge number, right? And so going back to, as my two colleagues said, I think people are at a point to where it's okay to be informed about things you don't know. And so research shows early interventions prove really positive outcomes. And I know whenever I talk to a Black or brown family about mental wellness and the positive outcomes of getting early interventions, I think you have to, one, educate, right? And then forget what you already know as a professional. So not going in saying, because I'm a therapist, a social worker, a future doctor, that I know everything, but I'm also willing to really learn your story, right? And what that does. And so for me, even day one, when I work with a family, I always say, well, what is your expectation of me as your therapist? Because we got to set some kind of foundation before we develop treatment goals, objectives, or anything beyond today. And then I'll tell them my expectation of them as a parent or as a child. And I think you have to be really transparent, initially, and build that rapport. So you'll have really positive sessions moving forward.
So let me ask this question, and you brought it up. What happens? Well, I'm asking all three of you, and everything you're saying makes sense. I'm just trying to take it to a life-on-life thing that actually happens, so people can understand. What happens to that client that has first the client having insurance to come see you, that's an issue in itself, right? So the one that has insurance to come see you, but doesn't have money to pay the LG&E bill, and they're coming seeing you with the lights off, or they're coming seeing you with, as a therapist, are you giving them information how to get the lights on, or you don't know the struggle? What happens in your profession when people with life and life terms is just kicking them square in the butt, but they're trying to find things out, they're being honest. Where does the therapy go outside the couch? If you say couch or chair, whatever you say now, what happens after that point when they tell you the issues like, hey man, I'm about to repo my car, and what do you do as a therapist? I know it's medical things you can't do, but how does that hit you when you look at people that are going through life on life terms and it's just at the bottom right now?
Yeah, I'll let you guys go first.
It's definitely challenging to listen to people's stories and knowing that their basic needs aren't being met. Excuse me. It's really hard to address mental health concerns and what they want or expect out of a therapy when they don't know how they're going to eat or if their lights are off. So I think me as a social worker, I kind of have all this like network of people who know how to find resources for families. So I can kind of just call someone and say, hey, I have this family. Do you know any resources? So I definitely work to connect my families and clients with resources. There's a lot of resources out there for, getting your LG&E cut back on, rent assistance, transportation, bus passes, food vouchers, school clothes, clothing vouchers, a lot of different things. So we don't just stop at mental health like we.
Great. Go ahead, Perry.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what she said, especially the part where counseling is very ineffective if a client is always in a state of crisis. And we know this. So we have resource bounders, and there's the option of, depending on what the situation is, possibly getting them a case manager. People think of, when they hear that word case management, it brings this stress and anxiety, and it's not Child Protective Services when we're talking about case management. You know what I mean? It's really a person that's there to be a resource to you that connects you with all these resources in the community to help you get established so that real therapy can begin. Yeah,
and not to cut you off, but you hit a point when you talked about trust, right? And we talk it like in the neighborhood, the snitch mentality. So let's say a client comes to you and they have some real issues, right, that they really want to share, but they have that snitch mentality that if I say this, I'm out of pocket, but it may need to be said to a therapist. Do you guys ever have to deal with that where I can't tell you because, and if they told you, everything could almost be resolved overnight? So do you deal with that?
Yeah, and I do, all the time. So just to kind of give you a visual, so like each year, with each family I work with, I do a kind of a annual update of their documentations, right? And so it's pretty much the same exact documentation that was the previous year and the year before that, right? But it asks you some really personal questions about, have you ever been sexually molested? Have you ever been physically abused? Who was the perpetrator? Were you the victim? Was it more than one victim? And so I know those questions can really be traumatic and re-trigger a lot of negative emotions. But so it might be one year the family answers each question to the T and gives me transparency. Then the following year they'll leave it blank, or they'll answer no all the way down. But I'm like, but the previous year you gave me the name, the date, the time, the location, and so that's difficult to deal with, right? Because I do understand those memories bring up a lot of negative emotions, and so even before an annual recertification process, I try to give some verbal prompts like, hey, we got this coming up, and remember, here's some X, Y, Z questions you may be asked again. And so, yes, I deal with it, especially in the black and brown communities. There's this distrust. And as you know, it goes back to the whole Tuskegee Airmen experience, when they was injecting us with syphilis, and physicians knew it, right? And fast forward to now, the 21st century, I know Perry, he can relate to this. There are so few black male therapists, right? And a lot of single moms who have young men always request to have black men, right? And so Perry and I would probably never, ever have an issue with getting a job anywhere, because there's just so many single moms or just families who want black men as a therapist. And so, I mean, I turn down cases every week almost. Like, I just don't have enough room, and I send them to Perry.
Yeah, he sends them to me, and then I send them to another therapist that works for me. And I'll piggyback off on what he said with that, because one thing I need people to kind of realize, as far as dealing with that fear of dealing with case managers, dealing with counselors and whatever, we are all medical professionals here. And as a medical professional, we are bound by HIPAA guidelines. We are bound by a professional code of ethics for whatever our discipline is. And so it really, with that understanding, kind of eliminates some of those things where if you confide in me, I can't go tell your mom. I can't go tell anybody. I just can't do it. You can sue me. I can lose my license. My livelihood is connected to that. There are very few situations where I can just disclose. And we talk about that at the very beginning of the counseling relationship and throughout the counseling relationship. If you say this, I've got to respond this way, or say this, you know what I mean? But outside of that, you know, I like to clear that up, because a lot of people have that fear. Like, I can't talk to a therapist because they're just going to go tell my business out in the street.
Yeah, I mean, and I asked you a question because I remember going to the doctor not long ago for my knee, and the first question they asked me was, did I know anybody with COVID, right? And I'm going like, I ain't snitching, you know what I mean? It's somebody with COVID, I ain't telling nobody, you know, I ain't gonna be a COVID snitch, you know. So you know, so that just brought something to me when they was asking those questions, and that's true too. I ain't gonna tell, he might be going to, I ain't telling
I wonder
you
what
know.
would happen if you told him yeah.
I don't know, because I didn't, you know. So, but I'm just, but they ask those kind of personal questions, and you kind of go like, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, and when you put it on you like that, it's okay. Now, if I was a client of yours and you asked that question, I don't know if I would tell you even if he was my therapist, especially if I wasn't around the person with COVID, right? Why would I put that information out? So yeah, I went through that, and it really kind of shook me for a minute. Like, okay, they're asking people this question, and you think about it, it's a very personal question.
Yes.
That can affect their life in whichever way they decide to live their life. That particular question, and you answering it, can affect them whether they're on a job, off a job, get a job. You know, so I mean, that's just the time we're living in. But that's when I brought that stitch mentality that I know you guys are probably going through.
Yeah.
And another thing, that when I invited you guys, and like I said, it's about, you know, the emotions, the things that we go through as a community. But the one reason I brought you guys, in my lifetime, I could never look, well, we didn't have internet when I came up, but it was just getting started. But I never expected something to pop up, Black Therapist. And it was a national organization, or Black Psychologist. That's something you didn't see 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. And I thought that was so cool, because even at the museum, the whole part of this museum is telling the image, telling the narrative of who we are, that we were descendants of kings and queens. We were descendants of kings and queens that were enslaved in America. That's an image changer. That's a game changer, right? So when I looked at that, when I saw Black therapists, that was a game changer for me. You know, so I can imagine what young people can see, and, ooh, I can be a therapist. I can be a psychiatrist. And that's when I asked, what's the difference between a psychiatrist? Because I went and looked for myself. What's the difference? Whether you go to school longer, what does it entail? So I think the profession that you guys are doing at this point in time is so needed. But I think what's needed most is the relationships you can make with people that look like you. And I think it's a vital time where, you know, we got to learn to tell our narrative or hear our narrative. I always say that the biggest knock on Barack Obama to most white communities is that he gave credence to the things we went through. If he said he was pulled over by a police officer, he told that story. And you got to remember, people don't want to believe that is a story till the movie cameras came on or the the cameras came on the phones. So I think, you know, the reality that gives credence to who we are and what we are, at some time it just kind of takes us off a track, if that makes sense. But being a psychiatrist or being a therapist, do you find yourself, do you have to self-help yourself? Do you have to look in the mirror and check your own self to stay straight?
Yeah.
You said that loud. Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead. Let me tell you
All
answer
the
that.
time. It's so important to have your own, you know, process of self-care and taking care of yourself because, you know, like our clients, we are experiencing it as well. And, you know, we don't know either. And a lot of times, one of my issues is boundaries. Like, I just want to go in and save and be, you know, overextend myself, especially during this time. And I have to look myself in the mirror and say, like, this is unethical, or why is this bringing this emotion out of you? What is it that you've gone through that is, you know, having this reaction to where you feel like you have to have this savior mentality? There's a lot. I think I'm checking myself almost every day in my career right now.
Yeah, no, because you said boundaries and self-care.
You said yeah or no. You talking to two different people?
No.
Were you just talking to you, or were you talking to somebody
I'm talking to everybody.
Okay.
I just
want to make sure you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's self-care.
Okay.
So self-care, I think for me, so when I first started doing therapy, I was in the Superman mode to where I wanted to save everybody. Like, I can provide whatever services you need for whatever issue you have. And it just does not work like that, right? But it took me almost maybe 3 or 4 years to really accept the fact that, man, one, you can't save everybody, but more importantly, everybody doesn't want to be saved. Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with that? How do you respond to that family? And so I always go in with a realistic goal for myself. And so during the week, I make it a point not to check my email after 5 p.m. If it's not an Uber emergency, I'm tapping in the next morning, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think, you know, you can get so bombarded with just doing work at home. And for me, that's not fun, right? If I've spent the whole day doing therapy and then I'm taking a lot of work home, you know, my weekends is probably spent doing more work too. And so I don't check my email after 5 p.m. Typically, if a client texts me, and it's not an emergency, and it's past like 7 or 8, I don't respond to the very next morning.
And that's self-care for you.
It's self-care for me because, again, I know how to problem solve if it's not severe, right? If it's severe, of course, I'll handle it and address it. And then for boundaries, I think for me, boundaries has been super important because a lot of my families, and Perry, you might can relate, a lot of my families are single moms, right? And so I'm 34, but I don't look 34, I don't think. And so
like 19,
19,
12,
21.
12, 15.
Yeah. So, but
middle school.
Know,
Can I keep going? Middle school. No, I'm just kidding.
Throwing shots still. But no, to that point though, Mr. Lamont, like there was one point where I did a lot of home-based therapy. So I would go into homes, sometimes during dinner. And so parents will offer me food, you know, something to drink. And after a while, I was looked at as a family member as opposed to a professional, right? And he's talking to my son, and my son is really divulging his personal information, and my son's progressing. There's sometimes a curiosity factor like, ooh, what else can he do good, right? And so there's been times where, you know, a mom has, you know, sent me a text message. I'm like, ooh, hold on. Boundaries.
Right.
And so I always approach moms as Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Jones, because I want you to understand that I'm a professional. I can be friendly, but I am not your friend.
Correct.
And so that's been something that I take pride into, because like Perry said, from an ethical standard, I can't lose my livelihood, you know, over a text message or email. Mm-hmm. So I just make sure that those boundaries are set in place from day one, and I make sure I preface those throughout. Mm-hmm.
Now, Carla, how does it work for you too?
As like,
Do you have to put boundaries up?
yes, yes.
Come on, go. Let me stretch
us
it out.
some-
Give
give
us
us
some
some
more.
details,
Yeah,
Neil.
give us something.
Hey, for example,
I
Yeah.
have to have very strict boundaries with my families and the children. Once you do build that rapport with these children and they, they trust you, they want to text you all the time, they want to go home with you, they want to, they want to call you mom. They say, they just latch on to you basically, and the parents do too. Like, there's a couple instances where I had some mothers, very casually address me as like girl and sis and friend and calling me and come get these kids and I, and and it's you have to maintain that that level of professionalism in order to meet the goals. The goals. So a lot of times I'm like, let's take it back. I know we have this really good relationship, but X, Y, Z. I need you to. We have a plan that we have to stick to, and I'm not going to be in your life forever. And I think when you are always readily available to your families and to your clients, you're doing them a disservice at best. Because
So clients never become friends? It never happens?
it shouldn't.
Okay.
not in my
But
case.
it shouldn't. But it's sometimes hard
Not to.
not to. Yeah,
Okay.
If I'm being completely honest.
Okay.
Yeah, we care about the people we work with, so
Right.
that line could easily be blurred. You know what I mean? And that rolls all the way back to that self-care thing. I have the same stories as Jerron does. I do some home based, and then I've had some single mothers that liked me, and I figured that out. You know what I mean? So I had to put that.
Big Daddy, come to me type of thing, right?
Something like that, but I had, you have to put that firm boundary in place and just keep it professional, and that's where self-care comes in. If I have issues going on at home, and I'm not taking care of myself, doing the things that keeps me grounded, listening to music. I'm an introvert, so me talking to people all day long takes a lot out of me. So when I go home, I need silence and just relaxation. If I'm not doing those things and I find myself overwhelmed, then I drop my guard. And then it makes me more susceptible to crossing those kind of boundaries that I shouldn't be crossing. So it's important. So as I'm teaching the clients about self-care, meditation, doing those preferred activities to kind of reduce your stress levels, I have to practice the same thing. We're all imperfect people. I'm imperfect just like everybody else, and we just try to work together to get things in order.
Let me bring another question, not question, just something that I dealt with. I was listening to the news today. We're talking about natural hair. It's just women, right? Not let alone men wearing different styles. Issues that when I came up was afro when I was a teenager, right? But now it's a whole different level. We're expressing ourselves with hairstyles and the things that we do. And I remember when my youngest daughter that graduated from HBCU, and she was the campus queen of the college. I won't say what the university is. And it was a great experience. But I remember even this HBC university told her that she had to press her hair or put chemicals in it before she could put the crown on her head, pretty much. It's something that you would think at a HBCU when you're thinking about the image of black people, we can look like we want to look, right? And I remember, talking to her, and I probably wasn't on the right side of it. I probably said, go ahead and press your hair, no big deal. You know what I mean? Yeah. It looks queen-like, whatever stereotype that even as a historian I know better than, I might have came on that side. I don't really remember, but I probably did come on that side. And I remember her staying grounded on who she was and what she was going to be, right? And I just took it as, here we are in 2020, right? And I'm dealing with therapists. How do we look at young people and let them know they can be who they want to be or who they're called to be? How do you deal with those kind of issues? Just like it's okay to wear your hair natural. You shouldn't get fired for that. You shouldn't think you're not cute if you don't. How do you guys deal with that? Because there should be issues that's coming up about self-esteem. Is that not right?
Yeah. So big ups to HBCUs. I love them. Shout out to K-State, Simmons, all those good HBCUs locally.
Well, here we go again.
I got some good folks over there that teach faculty members. So, but anyway, for me, I don't work with women for the ethical reason. I've seen some really good men therapists be terminated for false allegations. So I just choose not to go to that sector. So with young men though, I think when young men, again, I go back to the transparency piece, Mr. Lamont. So for me, I like to wear tennis shoes and t-shirts, but I also like wearing suits and ties. And I think regardless of what you wear, young men appreciate you giving them the raw and uncut version of who you are. And I think if it's relatable to some of their upbringing and some of their day-to-day life skills and life challenges, there becomes a really respect factor, so to speak, right? And so I'll give you an example. I've got this young man who I've been working with for umpteen years. I mean, a long time. He lived in Louisville. His family relocated to Georgetown, Kentucky. And so for a very long time, his family would transport him to Louisville each and every week to get therapy services, right? And they did it for a year and a half consistently. And I was like, whoa, like you have all these other therapists in Georgetown and in Lexington, but you choose to still commute. But I referenced that piece because I think from day one, I set that foundation of like, I'm going to work hard, but you've got to work harder than me if you want complete change, right? So I always use the analogy like I'm GPS in the passenger seat. I help you get there, but you've got to drive the car to your destination. And I'll hold you accountable. I'll give you verbal prompts. I'll encourage you, and I'll correct you. And I think children just want to be heard these days, right? If you go to a elementary, middle, high school, and you can probably walk past the AP's office, assistant principal, unless, I'm not going to say schools, but some of those poverty-stricken schools, you can go to their AP office, walk past and see maybe 5 or 10 kids every day. And they're probably there based on behavior challenges, right? A lot of those behavior challenges stem from they don't feel like anybody's listening to them, right? And so I think, as a therapist, naturally we do listen really well. I hope so. And so when kids know that they're being heard, but also too, you're implementing what they're telling you, the world just is so much better for myself and the kiddo or the adult. So I think you have to listen now more than ever because they have so much to say and they have so much potential. I think it's up to us to really kind of like
and they want to express themselves.
Absolutely.
Who they are and what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah.
Go ahead.
When we're talking about self-esteem, I think, and how you wear your hair and, how you dress, I think the biggest piece for me is to just saying, like, you can wear your hair however you want to. If you want to straighten it, great. That's on you. But where the issue comes in is thinking that you're more beautiful with straight hair. That's where the problem comes in.
Sure.
So what I tend to do is provide education, like, you're not more beautiful with straight hair. You're more beautiful however you feel more beautiful. So whatever makes you feel good is what you should do. And I'm constantly challenging their negative thoughts about, how they look, just constantly. Because I work with girls. Most of my clients are little black girls. And it's constantly like affirmation, like look how beautiful you look, or look how your hair, look how big and gorgeous your hair is. So it's like I'm constantly like putting that in their head, and then I'm even working with the parents because like a lot of black parents, it's like embedded in them to think that baggy pants is correlated with criminal activity or gold teeth and braids and do-rags, and I'm constantly like, so how somebody dresses means that they're a criminal. You know, I just kind of like get their gears turning. Just because your kid wants to wear whatever he wants to wear doesn't mean he's involved in, gang violence. Like, let him or her express themselves how they want to, especially right now when COVID-19 is huge and everything that helps shape a child's identity has been taken from them,
And I talk about, and I get to you, Barry, is that, from the museum standpoint, I talk about clothes sometimes because people don't even understand the history of clothing in our community or historical facts to it. We were the only people that were brought to America with no clothes, right? And the symbol of freedom was new clothes. Right. People don't realize that. When we got new clothes that looked like whatever they were wearing as Americans, that was our symbol of freedom. Then we went to HBCU colleges. It was about clothing. It was identity to the white community, fraternities. The whole gamut of clothes has always evolved around our culture. And I think the point you're making is that you don't have to be dress a certain way, but image is important of who you are, and we have to deal with the psyche of the individual. And so I get that totally, because that's what the museum's about. It's about seeing who they are, deeper than what people see. And I think that's what makes you stronger. When you can be yourself. Yeah.
Be you.
Yeah, I was really going to go the direction that you went in talking about how deep that issue really is and where it stemmed from all the way back to slavery and the forced adaptation of African Americans to this Eurocentric idea of what beauty is.
Correct.
We all have our preferences, and I know how I was raised, that Eurocentric idea of beauty was prominent, but when we really dig into it, the biggest thing that you mentioned earlier was that working on self-esteem, teaching that individual about valuing themselves and their self-worth, and really beyond that, we as a community, an African American community, have to work to uplift each other and not harp down on those Eurocentric standards. I may have a preference one way or the other, but that doesn't mean that I should judge you based on you not meeting my preference. And I think that's where it comes in. We as a community have to uplift each other and really come together on those situations so that if someone does go into the workplace and they are discriminated against based upon that, we stand up for each other.
And I think it's so important that we understand the things that we've dealt with all our life, whether it's a brown paper bag situation just between us and what color you was, who got the opportunity to go to college. Those things are real in our community. Those things that we actually, for generations, had to deal with or overcome. A lot of times it was the lighter-skinned Negro that got to go to college. It was a lighter-skinned Negro that got to go to the swimming pool. So there's some advantages to skin tone, right? And what we've done over generations, we've taken those same ills and brought them along. It's changed to a point, I think, where at least the representation of color, the colorism, we're identifying with it, and everybody's getting an equal opportunity, I think, to this point than when I was younger. But still, there's issues we have to deal from a self-esteem standpoint, and I know you do if you're dealing with young people today, because I can hear the same things I heard when I was a kid about certain kids. Well, she's too dark, or she's this, and those things still exist today. And I think therapists, especially if we have therapists that look like us, that can tell a young person, you need to, that's not who you are. That's what's so important in our community, is people like you rebuilding our children. I think it was Frederick Douglass said it's so easy to repair a child before the, I can't remember the whole quote. I'm trying to think of it. What was it? You remember the quote?
I don't remember it.
Yeah. But anyway, it was dealing with, repairing a kid from the inside before the breach tears them apart. And then as a sign, I guess I'm a historian. I think I'm more of an ancestor that's trying to become a better ancestor. But what I always try to stress is that it's image is everything. Our story is everything. The mirror is everything. What you see in that mirror is what's coming out. Absolutely. Right? And that's why I think therapists are so important to rebuild what's been torn down, the breach, repair the breach. I think that was part of the quote from Frederick Douglass. It was so easy to repair children before the breach or something like that. And that's even true today. And it may be so much, it may be even truer today because of the opportunities we have than it's ever been before. So again, having black therapists, having black psychiatrists, having someone look like us, sit down with us, has to be the ultimate reward for young people today. So I applaud what you guys are doing and what you continue to do. So that's the reason I want to do this. But let me talk about, the show was No More Tears. That's from an emotional standpoint. We've been through so much. They deal with baby mama drama, guys dealing with going to jail, credit problems, just so many issues that's going out there today. So many tears are wasted in a sense, even though you can learn from tears. So how do you deal with someone that's just totally emotionally drained as a psychiatrist? I know it's not a one-day build, but you are building people up. Is that not right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
So I always tell, parents and children or any of the service providers that's in the case that this is definitely kind of that cliche saying, just trust the process, right? I think effective therapy is can be a really daunting process in a positive way, right? Because for me, I do the assessment piece. During the assessment piece, I'm kind of building some kind of rapport. Within the rapport building process, I'm learning the strengths and weaknesses, what they like and what they do not like. They're learning me in a sense, but I'm giving them some consistency, right? Because I'm showing up on time each and every week or every other week. But then two, preparing them for how to respond during those rainy days, right? Because there's going to be days you don't want to show up. There's going to be days you don't want to engage. And I always tell families, your character is based off how you respond to any given situation as opposed to the situation itself. And again, I think once you give parents a toolkit for change, and it's accessible pretty much all the time, I think it gives them some validation to continue to push the needle forward, right? So I think for me, it's really empowering parents like never before. And I always tell parents and kids, when we're in a room or, as you said, a couch, a car,
A park.
the school steps, a park. I try to make sure that if you're in front of me, you're the only person that matters at that particular time. I don't care what's going on behind you or where you're going when you leave here or what I'm doing. I try to make sure that you're the only thing that matters during those 45 minutes to an hour. And once kids understand how important they are to you at that point, man, the sky's the limit.
Let me flip the script. I'm going to flip it, whoever jumps on it. We talking about, you ready? Flip it.
Flip that bad baby.
Okay. Let's talk about defunding the police. And what is that saying to our community? We know we're having issues with the police force. We know what we deal in the criminal system. And we talk about defunding the police. I know my opinion on what that means. But as a therapist to the situation that we have in the current police force, how do you guys fit into defunding the police? What do you see your role into that mission? Somebody jump on
No,
it.
I will. I'm letting them go, though.
I've seen things like circle around where maybe social workers will start responding to things. To me, I see the issues in that because I don't know how. I think that the problem would just become that social workers would become the new police because it needs to be addressed on a deeper level. Like there needs to be more education, there needs to be more training, there needs to be implicit bias training and all of the things. I don't think you can just tell a social worker, which is also a field that has been built on very Eurocentric values and is just now starting to, expand out. So I think that if you're asking me how I interact with my clients and when they ask me questions like that, I don't think it's appropriate to discuss my personal bias and opinions with them, rather than just educating them on what everything means. But that's my
Yeah, but I really didn't mean With them, I mean
Okay.
talking to the community. What does a therapist's role in defunding the police mean to you, or is it a role for you? And I mean, maybe you like the Eurocentric type of policeman we have now, which was funded from slave laws, and it's we know what it was set to be. It was set to control black people, brown people, and poor people. Right. So if we're talking about defunding the police and rebuilding that action, what does that look like to you as a therapist? Is there a role for a therapist in that? That's what I'm asking.
I feel like there, if done right, there is a role. There are cities that are piloting, sending out therapists to deal with the police officers, so that a therapist is going to recognize mental health versus something else faster than a police officer who's never been trained. So I can see how that could benefit. To have that therapist come out there like, hold on, put that gun away, I got this, you know what I mean? But I think on another level than just being directly on the force and involved in that, I just really feel like some of that money from the defunding should go into prevention.
Yes.
Law enforcement has always been a reactive system. There's a call that comes in or something going on, we respond. And the focus has never really been in law enforcement on getting out there, building relationships with the community, putting in programs to get youth on the right page, and really just doing those fundamental things. And I believe that therapists, counselors, or whatever could be integral in the planning of that stuff.
Okay.
And how teaching law enforcement, this is how you build relationship. This is how you keep trust.
So you do believe there should be a reworking of that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What about you?
Yeah, so when I think about the term defunding police, there's two words that come to mind, transactional and transformational. And so if you go down the street to 16 Jefferson, you see a barrage of people who've been protesting consistently 100 plus days. I'm 99% sure there's some secondary trauma if in most of them, if not all of them, who's been down there, right? Mm-hmm. Some have lost jobs. Of course, economics has probably decreased. Some has probably lost relationships with spouses and kids or whatever. And so what's going on down there is to me, it's transactional, right? They're consistent. They're fighting for a common cause, to have white allies. It's good, right? Now, I think what happened was yesterday with the Breonna Taylor's family getting, $12.5 million, and then all these reforms, these policies, modifications. To me, that's transformational in a sense, right? And so when you talk about defunding, like Perry said, you have to think about reallocating those funds to mental health practitioners. Because again, I said, there's people down there right now who probably have either been diagnosed with something or could very well be diagnosed with something right now. And if that goes untreated moving forward, especially after whatever decision is made, it's going to perpetuate what they have already been going through, right? Mm-hmm. Triggered easily. It may be a lot of just physical violence, verbal aggression. So I think, and from what I understand, one of the reforms is like, I think Carly said, includes mental health therapists in terms of providing some additional funding or even funding period. So I'm a fan of it. I look forward to see what's going to happen. My only issue, Lamont, with politicians is typically politicians are very reactive off public opinion as opposed to doing the good deed for the people. And within the since March, that's all we've seen, just politicians responding to, pressure from the community as opposed to just doing the right thing for the minoritized communities.
And if let's say the funding the police did happen, and all of a sudden it opened different avenues as a therapist, would you see yourself in a police car riding up? But it's not the therapy you signed up to do. I'm asking that question.
Would I see myself in a police car?
Yeah. Do you see yourself signing up for that, or it'd be something totally different than what you
meet
said?
them there. I wouldn't ride in the same vehicle with them. Because I think because here's what's happening. There's still this distrust with the police community and the black and brown community members. So that's a whole different can of worms, right? I think Like my druthers, I think police who don't live in a certain community should be policing those communities.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or there should be a mandated amount of on-hand training that you have to say. For example, if I'm a police and my beat is Russell, but I'm from Prospect, you have to at least serve 6 months while you're in the academy in the Russell neighborhood. I think it doesn't happen like that. So yeah.
Okay, cool. You know, I really want to jump on that, that we're going to police ourselves type of, you know, that happened, you know, back in the 20s and 30s. Black police officers only could arrest black people. So if you talk, yeah, that's how all over the United States, when they brought black detectives and black policemen, your power was only in the black community. And the white policemen could lock up everywhere. So when you start talking about us policing us, I don't know if it's turning back time or if it's moving forward. So that's a different conversation that I love to deal into. But it's something that we have to talk about, especially, you know, I do some construction in Florida, and a lot of times policemen were living in those neighborhoods. They did that, right? But what I noticed is that the neighborhoods that was gentrified the most, gentrification took the most, is where they lived. Right, so they didn't live in the roughest part. They lived in the part that went through gentrification that called so it was like a shell game.
Yeah.
Correct? And I would hate to see in Louisville that the policemen all of a sudden live in Russell because Russell's got $40 million coming to it, and they're not going to shiny, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think even with that whole idea of policemen living in your neighborhood, what does that really mean when that happens? And I think we have to be due diligent on looking what does that really mean. We're about to wrap up. Before we wrap up, I want everybody to realize that we're our nonprofit, ROOTS101 African American Museum. Our cash app is ROOTS101 AAM, ROOTS101 AAM, and we will not be here unless you guys help support us. We have not, and I've said it 1,000 times, we have not got the corporate support I thought we should have or have gotten, and we haven't got the city support. But we're going to continue to tell our story and move forward. The last question I ask anybody that sits at the table is, I always say that my role is not to try to be a leader. I've done that. My role is to be a better ancestor. And what I mean by that is that I help make the community better than where I found it, make young men better than where I found it, young women. So my whole charge on the back of my shirt says becoming a better ancestor. So if I ask you that question, Perry, becoming a better ancestor, what does that mean to you?
For me, my passion, and I feel like my call, which is why I'm teaching and doing all that, is to train the next generation of counselors. I want to speak directly to my community. If you have your bachelor's degree and you want to go into mental health, please contact me. Let's get you in the program. We need you. We need everybody. There's such a need, a great need. And I feel like my influence, the way I can make things better, is to spread my knowledge and to empower other African Americans to do this work that I do.
Cool. Colin?
For me, what that means to me is kind of, what I live by, and that's just being what I needed when I was younger. Just educating, empowering, and, healing as much as I can. That's what that means for me.
Yeah, so for me, what comes to mind is having great intentions and a purpose behind everything I do. And so with that comes, I'm a big engager. So I think as long as I'm engaging with my community, I'm at a point in my life where anything that I do, it's not really about me, it's how can I give back. And so part of that ancestry piece is really giving back, and like Perry said, just passing that knowledge forward, because we got to pass this torch at some time. You say you're not a leader anymore, you're an ancestor. So you've made a way, you've paid a foundation for yourself, and now you're passing the torch on to the younger generation. I think that's what we all got to do intentionally and with a really found purpose.
Right. There's an African proverb that I kind of change around, but just to simplify it, but it says that the greatest king of the village lives to plant the shade tree knowing he won't live long enough to live under it. And that's what I want to do. Plant the shade tree for other people to get under it and get away from the sun. All right. Thank you for coming to the healing process. No more tears. You guys did a great job. And if my numbers don't drop, okay, I will have you back. But if my numbers drop, I will not have you back. I'm just no, but thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Roots 101 African American Museum. Have a blessed day. Legacies matter.